Awesome. Well, that was a helpful download.
Okay.
I like it. I like the concept. I think there's something here. I think you have to refine. I think you have too many assumptions in about the use case, in my opinion.
Okay.
You're assuming that um, you're assuming so assumptions are okay. I mean, you need to have assumptions up to a certain point,
Yep.
but I would like to minimize the amount of assumptions that you have. For instance, you are assuming that someone would buy new furniture per move-in, right? So that something simple like that would weed out a big percentage um of your the initial folks that would use it, right? Like we call let's call them beta
Hmm.
customers.
Hmm.
Um, I think if I were you, I would distill what is the essence of the value prop, right? Which is um, a more homey feeling, like a splash of interior design.
Yep.
It
Yep.
can't be so much that it alienates the landlord,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, Something simple. All right, so like in my building, I just brought a building online, and we did one accent wall
Yep.
in the bill, and oh my gosh, did that have a big impact on leasing? I
Okay.
mean, it was nuts. It was one wall that we painted dolphin gray,
Hmm. Hmm.
and like the floors, are nice wood floors or whatever. But when we finished it, we were like, man, I don't want it to feel like a white box. So what if we just did an accent wall?
Hmm.
And just that I think had a really big impact on leasing.
Yep.
I don't know how tangible of I don't know how tangibly you can calculate the ROI on an accent wall in terms of like um, retention. But
Yep.
you're right to tackle retention because it's the biggest cost for sure.
Okay.
It's a nightmare. I hate it when someone leaves. Then the space is not only do you have to work on turning it, but then you have to release it, and then when you release it, you have to pay your management company another 1 month commission. So you end up losing out easily on 3 months because of a
Mm.
turn in a tenant.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you're right to tackle that, but what I would want for your product, if I were in your shoes, is I would want an easier lift, a much easier thing to tackle versus tackling the furniture layout.
Okay.
Because I think it's a good value prop, but that to me strikes me as high effort, potentially high impact.
Okay.
But I think you can potentially high impact. I think you can start with something that's lower effort, high, and just as high impact. Let's
Okay.
say. So,
Okay.
like if you were to look at a matrix where it's like effort and impact,
Hmm.
you know, to start in the high effort, high impact category is going to introduce some unnecessary friction, which already you're going to be facing friction, and it's going to be an uphill battle because you're new. You got to prove yourself, you know, and we're of color. There's a bunch of like reasons why it's going to be uphill, none
Okay.
that are deterministic, all that we will be able to surpass. But then when it specifically comes down to the product level, um, if your pitch is, hey, I could find the ideal furniture for me
Okay.
as a landlord, I would think like, okay, so what? Because they're going to be moving with their own furniture, I would presume.
Okay.
Um, so in order for your thesis to work with that initial premise, you would have to find someone that's moving, a building that's willing to use you, has
Yep.
someone that's moving, has someone that's abandoning their
Oh,
prior goods,
yep. Yep.
and then also buying from you. So it's
Got it.
like, damn, that's
It's a
tough. That's
okay.
a tough sell. So
Okay.
and then I would be just concerned that you might have that friction, and you might think that it's because your product isn't good, but it's not that the value prop isn't there. It's just that you
Okay.
started with something that was a little too much,
I see.
right?
I see.
so
Yep.
so then so now as a founder we think, okay, cool, so we have that as a vision, and you could even disregard everything I'm saying and test it with the market, because it
Okay.
doesn't matter what I tell you, it matters what the market tells you.
Yep.
Maybe there is some hidden need for this, but my sense, just having seen a lot of startup companies grow, is that you're going to need to tackle something that's a little bit of a lighter lift that can still have a big impact. And it's light for the tenant, it's light for the landlord. It's kind of a win-win. It's easy
Okay.
for people to say yes to you,
Okay.
right? Because you really want to reduce the friction, not only of people to use your product, but ultimately, first comes landlord saying yes to you.
Mhm.
Yes. You want to make it really easy. So the more complication, the more possibility that someone gets hung up on something. So with
Okay.
with that said, right? So okay, fine. Well, the value prop is still there. I like the idea of giving my tenant the ability to pseudo customize the
Right.
space.
Right.
Nothing crazy. If you paint a wall, we can always paint it white.
Right.
So
Right.
nothing crazy, but something that give does because I agree in the rental market, it doesn't take that much for
Right.
something to have a pop.
Right.
Condos feel totally different.
Right.
I've never lived in a condo. I almost bought a condo and then I bought a building instead. But
Mhm.
I was gonna rent the condo one time, and I just remember that there were some slight finishes that
Mm.
were that much more like they were that much nicer that made me feel like, okay, I'm in a condo,
Right.
like
Right.
something about like, just the renter grade, the duct, for instance, the
Mhm.
above the range hood above the stove.
Yeah.
On most rentals that I've had, it's like, you have the range hood
Wow.
come above with the microwave over it. And
Yeah.
then in the condo, it was like that standalone. It's like there
Yep.
was an island.
Good.
So just
Yeah.
the little touches. Now that kind of stuff would be expensive to do.
Right.
But now I kick the question to you. Are there some low effort things that you feel like you could get good at doing efficiently and
Perfect.
effectively?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, so thank you for that. One of the services that Rented plans to offer, we call it our personality package, right? And so this is the all the things around your, big items, but
Mhm.
you still that help to bring the space together. So some of those things are temporary wallpaper, changing the hardware on cabinetry, changing light fixtures, right?
Okay.
Like you said, the accent wall,
I like that. Yep.
sconces that don't have to be, drilled into the wall. So like you use language, that's exactly what we use. We call it high impact, low permanence solutions, right? So we're looking
Mhm.
for those things that are dial up high on personality that are still very rent friendly. So those are the sort of
Love that.
packages.
I love that. I
Yeah.
think that ends up being your flagship product to start.
Okay. Okay.
Because like I just like I took in that data way differently
Okay.
than the furniture,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because it's so personal and it can be expensive. And so I just would hate to put that roadblock in your way unnecessarily to
Okay.
start.
Okay.
Whereas this, I could just tell, but just by the way I ingested the data as an owner, I'm
Okay.
like, yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Okay.
Really light stuff that they can take up and take down. And if it'll make them feel at home, amen.
Okay.
And if it'll, I love that. I
Okay.
absolutely love it. So now, okay, so then help me think through, um, if you did this kind of package,
Mhm.
that would be at the expense to the landlord or to the customer, or are you still kind of working that through right now?
Well, the plan for that so the personality package would be an expense through um the tenant. Yeah, that wouldn't be a cost to the building as I had originally planned it.
So why do you even need the landlord's permission at all?
Sure. So a part of it is about the customer acquisition costs, right?
Mhm.
So going directly B2C, the costs for this category are really, really high. I've
Yeah.
spoken to like the Havenleys and Modsies of the world to get a sense of it, my
Okay.
competition. Whereas the buildings allow me to get to scale, in
Understood.
a way.
Understood.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that's
I like that.
for
Okay.
that.
Um, hmm.
May I ask you a question while you're
Yeah, please.
waiting?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was super eager to talk to you about, I know you're familiar with this space, but thinking about the climate right now, um, and one of my reservations has been what is the appetite for something like this for developers and property managers right now? And
Yeah.
if you had any suggestions or recommendations on an approach for pitching, that actually gets people to sort of pay attention, I'd be eager because I've been very sort of reserved about it. Like I know everyone's trying to flounder and figure stuff out. A part of me
Mhm.
thinks this is a great time because it's an amenity that doesn't require any build out in a space,
Yep.
which I think is a big appeal. But again, I'm making a lot of assumptions, so I would love your take on that.
Well, I think that really, really depends on the type of building that you're targeting.
Okay.
And for instance, like I own property in PA, and it's a very blue collar neighborhood. So,
Okay.
you know, depending on what your cost would be, I don't see it catching as much here as it would in the type of markets that we're talking, a Jersey City of the world. Like Jersey
Gotcha.
City is like perfecto market for this. So
Gotcha.
then I've sold into buildings back when I was running my laundry business.
Mhm.
I had a division of my company that sold directly into higher end buildings so
Okay.
that we could effectively have space in the building where
Okay.
we were the in-house like concierge department,
Gotcha.
where what I did for them was I managed their package dilemma. Because so what happens is in a certain tier building, and this was in doorman buildings in
Yeah.
Brooklyn, stuff like that. The doormen also have to do packages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a great pain in the ass. It's a
Yep.
big pain in the ass, especially with buildings where people like order a lot and stuff like that. Takes away from them being at the desk. It introduces a lot of costs because then you need two doormen per shift and stuff like that. So what these companies started doing, particularly they were dry cleaning companies,
Okay.
they would sneak in there by saying, "Hey, give us a little space. We'll handle your packages."
Mm,
Okay, and you allow us to be the in-house um, dry cleaning valet. It was the valet, right?
yeah.
So you can force anyone to use you, but if
Right.
you send someone in there that's nice, like a face that's nice enough and likable enough, and eventually our target was to win over like 65% of
I
the
feel
building tenancy.
Mhm.
And tip the pricing model was two ways. It was either you paid a flat rate, so sometimes a management company would just charge you a flat fee. Other times, it would be a revenue share if they knew that it was like in one building that
Mm.
the guy who bought my company, I ended him getting this contract after I sold the business, but it was a 800 unit, like just a massive,
Wow.
massive high rise little complex on 42nd Street.
Okay.
But for the most, so yeah, but for the most part, it was like 400 units was the sweet spot, and we would do, yeah, that was the model. So
Okay.
I can say that those managers do look at amenities,
Mhm.
because they're competing in a different price point,
Okay.
and they're competing for a tenant that's upwardly mobile and looking for comforts, and so, you know, I can say if you target those buildings, I think that you have a reasonable in. I think it would still be hard
Mhm.
because I think the nature of this amenity is gonna strike someone initially as an unnecessary luxury.
Okay.
However, that's what you always are battling when you pitch into property managers.
Right.
They're just like, "That's unnecessary, that's because they're only watching the NOI, right?
Right.
The net operating income of the building,
Mhm.
the right? So now so that you get the you'll have to deal with the property managers, but so that you get their boss's, motivation, which is me, the owner,
Yep.
um, we only care about NOI in a
Okay.
property.
Yeah.
And why? Because once you get to these large commercial properties, the valuation of a building is an income-based valuation,
Okay.
and you get a multiple on your NOI.
Okay.
So anything that eats into NOI, it's not just like, for instance, if I raise my rents for $50, let's
Yep.
say,
Yep.
not a big deal. But if you have, you know, 100 units and it's $50 per the 100 units,
Right.
right? And
Right.
then you get and then you get a multiple on that. So it's not even just like you raise the property value 50,000. It's like you get a multiple based on what it's called the cap rate. Based on
Okay.
what the cap rate is for the neighborhood,
Okay.
you can dramatically improve the value of your buildings just based on small tweaks. This is why
Okay.
big landlords are so cheap. because
Okay.
they're always so, um, right, well, I guess in your case, you wouldn't necessarily impact their NOI because you're charging the tenant, and
Right.
then you could make the argument that, "Hey, this will help with retention."
Right.
So I think you have a reasonable value prop for the owner, and I think, presenting it in a really it's a very, people care about looks.
Yeah.
So we designed flawless, I mean, just beautiful packages, amenities in your lobby. That was a
Right.
tag and this and that. I mean, it was just all like we went ham on the design and we
Right.
and we really got people to and you have the opportunity to do the same because it's such a visual um
Cat.
forward type
Yeah.
of category that you're in.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, just to give you feedback on just like your strategy and everything, I think you're very on point. I think your intuition has led you to a great place. I love the B2B2C angle. I think that that's a big differentiator for you here, because I agree. Consumer, like direct to consumer, will have greater margins. Well, maybe not even because you're charging the consumer anyway. So all you're doing is just like dramatically lowering your acquisition costs
Yeah.
and lowering the amount of resources that you need to be effective and break into the market anyway.
Okay.
Because once you get one of these property management companies, um, oftentimes those management companies, manage a portfolio of assets.
Right.
So
Right.
what we would aim for is just targeting. We would target. You could back into it two ways. You could back into it based on a building that you really want to be in,
Yep.
or a management company,
That owns.
and you can win over. We started with one property in this particular management company, and then
Yeah.
they rolled this out across others. And
Yeah.
one really sweet spot was there are buildings that have no doorman, but they're still managed by like upper tier management companies. And
Gotcha.
those buildings are often neglected. Everyone's trying to sell stuff to the doorman building,
Okay.
but if you can find a way to really add value to those buildings that don't have doormen, then
Yeah.
that's really interesting because now you're able to help landlords be more competitive in their B
That's
tier
good.
stock, their B minus stock,
Yeah.
where the A's, the A tier, it's going to be occupied.
Right. Right.
The B tier too, but to the extent that you can help them get a little bit of juice on the returns via lowered retention or just slightly higher rents, um, it's a slam dunk. So
Okay.
I love it. I think you're very smart. I think you come across really well. And I think that there's a business that you could build here.
Okay.
And this is the type of business that could be venture backable as well.
Okay.
And this is my 127th session now, and I've said that maybe a handful of times.
Okay.
Like I think people really think that their business is venture backable just because they read about venture and they're like, yeah, but they don't get it. Like
Right.
you need a business that has the potential to really ramp.
Right.
And just because of the nature of the acquisition and, it's a renter's economy, people
Yep.
are buying less homes. And so like it's
Exactly.
really suited to the current environment. I think it could do really well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. This
Yeah.
is really, really good news. That's
Yeah.
really, really good to hear.
Yeah.
John, thank you. Thank you so much for the
No,
time and the insight.
absolutely. I'm excited for you. I want to leave my email open to you.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be transactional. Just hit me up anytime as you have questions, as you flush it out, as you're refining your deck.
Okay.
I have it's been a long time since I've had you know what?
Ooh,
I think I got someone for you maybe.
okay.
Refine your materials. This is a
Okay.
man whom I brought into Harlem Capital as one of our investors,
Okay.
he's a brother, and he owns 1,000 units in Harlem.
Wow.
I think he's the largest Black-owned owner out there that no one knows. People don't know him.
Wow.
But this brother is experimental. He loves trying shit.
Okay.
He's really cool. He's the kind of guy who would maybe give this a shot. He's that kind of guy, and not a lot of real estate owners are like that. But even furthermore, I definitely did have some contacts in the New York City. I know you're not, I guess, not targeting NYC, but
Mhm.
I had some contacts with bigger property managers there. But it's been so long that I don't know if those are relevant anymore because
Gotcha.
property managers will move. It's not a job that has a high, it's a very high stress. So they leave every 2 to 5 years.
Gotcha.
But I do think that the owner is a better connect anyway.
I
So
was gonna ask that if you had a weigh in, is it really through the owners, versus the property manager?
the owner is typically a harder way in, but
Yes.
it's a more effective way in.
Okay.
Because property managers, how do I say this? They're like mid-level management,
Right,
you
right,
know, in a corporation. Like they have an pseudo power, so they like to, flaunt it, but then like they at the end of the day, they still got to get permission. So
okay,
I
okay,
like the owners better. So with an example like this, you know, this guy would just be like yes or no. And
got
if
it.
he says yes, then you're in there. And if he says no, then you're not,
Yeah, yep,
you know.
okay,
So
awesome,
okay.
awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much, John. This has been great, man. I really look forward to, like, keeping you updated with
Yeah,
progress.
what's your Instagram?
It is
I look for you.
Get Rented, so
Uh-huh.
GETRENTID.
Okay. Okay.
You can
Perfect.
follow
I'll
me
look
there.
for you. Cheers.
Awesome.
Have a
Thank
nice weekend.
you
Be
too.
well.
Take care. Bye.